I wasn't just losing my home. They were stealing it piece by piece, with doctor's notes and legal documents. She didn't even flinch when I asked if this was really happening. 4 months ago, Ashley said, "Dad, we think it's time you moved somewhere safer. You're having episodes. We just want what's best for you." And I stayed quiet. And then I let them file the paperwork. And the worst part? I let them think I believed their lies. That's when I realized this wasn't care. It was theft. I trusted my daughter to protect what we'd built together. She said I was getting confused, making dangerous mistakes, becoming a liability to myself. I didn't realize she'd already decided I was too expensive to keep around. The papers arrived on a Thursday morning in November, hand-delivered by a process server who looked like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Petition for guardianship and conservatorship, superior court, competency hearing required. In plain words, they were taking my life away legally. I read the documents 3 times before the words made sense. My daughter Ashley, age 39, licensed real estate agent, was petitioning the court to be appointed as my legal guardian and conservator on the grounds that I lacked the mental capacity to manage my personal care and financial affairs. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. The process server knew what he was delivering. The neighbors saw the official car in my driveway. I could feel curtains moving, phones coming out. In that moment, I wasn't a father. I was a spectacle. In a subdivision of 200 homes, legal proceedings don't stay private long. Everyone would know within hours that Ashley was trying to have her own father locked away. Some of you know exactly what this feels like. That moment when you realize the person you raised, loved, and trusted has been documenting your life, collecting evidence, preparing to erase you from your own story. The petition listed specific incidents with medical precision. On October 15th, respondent was found wandering his neighborhood at 3 a.m. in confusion, unable to remember his address. A morning walk, a medication change, one dizzy spell, 3 pieces of proof they planned to use. Each incident was detailed, dated, and supported by Ashley's professional assessment and the testimony of Dr. Harold, a psychiatrist I'd never met. I was 73 years old, living alone in the house I'd bought with my late wife Susan 42 years ago. Since Susan died 18 months ago from the stroke that took her so suddenly, I'd been managing everything myself. I'd maintained the house, managed my finances, taken care of my health. I drove to my appointments, cooked my own meals, handled my own affairs. But according to these documents, I was no longer capable of caring for myself. The house we'd bought for $85,000 was now worth $650,000. The life insurance from Susan's policy had paid off the mortgage. I owned it free and clear. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about my safety. It was about my house. And Ashley wanted me gone. That's when I stopped trusting and started watching. The morning was quiet around me, coffee growing cold in the mug Susan had given me for our anniversary. The clock ticking on the mantel where our wedding photo used to sit before Ashley suggested it might be too sad for me to look at every day. You don't run job sites for decades without learning how lies are built. I felt something shift in my chest, not fear, not confusion, something sharper and more focused. If Ashley wanted a competency hearing, she'd get one, but she might not like the outcome. That letter didn't arrive by accident. It arrived with a plan. The house felt different after I read those papers. Like every room had become evidence in a case I didn't know was being built. I didn't react. I remembered everything. Every conversation with Ashley over the past 4 months. Every visit that had felt more like an inspection than a daughter checking on her father. "Dad, are you remembering to take your medications on time? Have you been getting confused about dates lately? Maybe we should talk about some assisted living options, just to have information ready." She asked about my daily routine more than my emotional well-being. And every time she asked about my health, she took photos of my pill organizer, my appointment calendar, the notes I left myself. She was taking photos, not notes. Every concern had felt genuine at the time. Every suggestion had seemed to come from worry about her aging father living alone. If you've lived long enough, you recognize this pattern. Now I understood they had been surveillance disguised as love. Ashley had made her choice. She decided I was incompetent before ever asking how I felt about my own life. But something about the timing bothered me. My daughter's real estate business had been struggling. Her divorce 2 years ago had been expensive. She'd had to sell their house, move into a rental. If I were declared incompetent, my house would need to be sold to pay for care costs. My daughter would inherit the proceeds when I died. If I went into memory care, the house would be sold, and she knew it. I researched guardianship laws. Once someone was declared incompetent, their assets could be managed by a court-appointed guardian, often a family member. The guardian had authority to sell property. This wasn't about my safety. This was about my house and money. 2 days later, Ashley called during what she said was her lunch break. "Dad, I hope you got the papers. The court papers." Her voice had that careful tone I'd learned to recognize, professional concern wrapped around something I couldn't identify. "I got them. I want you to know this breaks my heart, but Dr. Harold says you're showing signs of early dementia. The wandering episode really scared me." That's what she wanted it to sound like. A loving daughter making an impossible but necessary decision to protect her father from himself. "Ashley, I wasn't wandering. I was walking. At 6 a.m., not 3 a.m., and I knew exactly where I was." "Dad, that's not what Mrs. Peterson said when she called me. She said you seemed confused and disoriented." After we hung up, I called Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor for 15 years. "Oh, Frank, I never said you seemed confused. I just mentioned to Ashley that I'd seen you walking early and wanted to make sure you weren't having trouble sleeping after Susan passed. I was worried about you being lonely, not confused." "Did you tell Ashley I seemed disoriented?" "Absolutely not. You were perfectly normal. We even talked about the weather and your garden plans for spring. But apparently, a concerned neighbor's call about my well-being had been transformed into evidence of cognitive decline. If you know, you know. Some of you already know where this is going. The feeling when you realize someone has been rewriting your reality, turning normal life events into symptoms of decline. I understood now why Ashley had been documenting everything. She needed evidence to support her petition, but evidence could be interpreted many ways, depending on who was telling the story. They didn't realize they were dealing with someone who'd spent 30 years managing construction projects. You don't build houses without learning how to read people who lie about timelines and budgets. The signature on my bank accounts had never changed. My name, my house, my decisions. The next morning, I did what any good contractor would do when someone was trying to cheat him. I gathered evidence. I called my primary doctor and requested my medical records from the past year. Clean cognitive assessments, no signs of dementia, no recommendations for supervised care. I called my bank and requested detailed account statements. All bills paid on time, no unusual transactions, no signs of financial confusion. The banker looked at my request and nodded approvingly. Most people don't stay this organized at your age. I called my insurance company to verify my driving record. Clean, no accidents, no violations. I called my neighbor and asked her to write down exactly what she'd told my daughter. But something bothered me about Dr. Harold. I'd never met this psychiatrist, never been evaluated by him. You don't run job sites for 30 years without learning who's lying. I called his office. Dr. Harold's evaluation was based on collateral information provided by your daughter. What evaluation? I never met with Dr. Harold. According to our records, his assessment was based on your daughter's observations of your declining mental state. He never met me. He just signed what she needed signed. That's when I understood the full scope of what she was planning. I hired a lawyer, not just any lawyer, an attorney who specialized in elder law and mental health advocacy. For 2 weeks, my lawyer investigated every aspect of my daughter's petition. He interviewed neighbors, reviewed my medical records, and had me undergo comprehensive cognitive and psychological testing with independent specialists. His findings were comprehensive and damning. "Frank, your cognitive function is normal for your age. Your financial management is exemplary. Your physical health is good. There is no medical basis for the claims in your daughter's petition." The independent neuropsychologist looked at my test scores and shook his head. "Someone filed a petition claiming this patient has dementia. These results show completely normal cognitive function." That single detail changed everything. Ashley's petition was based on manufactured evidence and a psychiatric evaluation conducted without ever meeting the patient. I wasn't declining. I was grieving, adjusting to life without Susan, occasionally making minor mistakes that any person living alone might make. Ashley needed evidence of incompetence that didn't exist, so she was creating it through selective interpretation and outright misrepresentation. The morning walk became wandering in confusion. The neighbor's friendly concern became reports of disorientation. A normal grief response became signs of early dementia. But there was no crisis, only a daughter who decided her father's house was worth more to her than his independence. I didn't tell Ashley I was fighting the petition. I prepared silently. Quiet people prepare louder than they speak. Paul and I built a comprehensive defense: medical records, cognitive test results, character witnesses, financial competency documentation. We also investigated my daughter's motivations and discovered more than I wanted to know. Her real estate license was on probation for an ethics violation. Her rental house was in foreclosure. Her credit cards were maxed out. She'd already contacted 3 memory care facilities about pricing, and she'd been researching guardianship laws for weeks. She wasn't worried about my decline. She was worried I wouldn't decline fast enough. My lawyer paused his note-taking when he read that part of the investigation report. Frank, she wasn't planning to wait for you to die. She was planning to use your house as collateral while keeping you locked away. Over 3 weeks, I documented every aspect of my daily life: grocery shopping receipts, appointment confirmations, conversations with neighbors, proof that I was living independently and competently. I arranged for character witnesses who could testify about my mental state and capabilities. I prepared for the fight of my life. 1 week before the hearing, Ashley called. "Dad, I think we should talk before we go to court tomorrow." "I think you're right," I said. "I hope you understand that I'm doing this because I love you. I understand exactly what you're doing." The day before the hearing, Ashley arrived at my house with a folder of brochures and what looked like a prepared speech. She seemed nervous, more nervous than I'd seen her since her divorce proceedings. "Dad, I brought some information about the memory care facilities I've been researching. Sunset Manor has an opening, and they specialize in early-stage dementia care." She spread glossy brochures across my kitchen table. Beautiful facilities with gardens and activity rooms and kind-looking staff members, all costing between $8,000 and $12,000 per month. "The social worker says if we act quickly, they can fast-track your admission. The judge will probably order an immediate evaluation, and they'll want to place you somewhere safe while they determine the appropriate level of care." I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I watched my daughter plan my imprisonment while discussing it like a vacation resort. She had no idea I'd spent 3 weeks preparing for tomorrow. No idea I'd built a defense case. She forgot I'd spent 30 years managing people who tried to cut corners and lie about quality. "Ashley," I said quietly, "before we talk about where I'll be living, I think there are some things you should know about tomorrow's hearing." "Like what?" I walked to my desk and pulled out Paul's folder. "Like the independent medical evaluations that confirm I'm mentally competent. Like the financial records showing I'm managing my affairs perfectly. Like the neighbor statement saying I've never appeared confused or disoriented." Her face lost all its color. "And like the investigation into your financial situation that shows exactly why you need access to this house." She sat down heavily in Susan's old chair. "Dad, you don't understand. I'm trying to help you." "Help me? Or help yourself to my house?" I opened Paul's folder and spread documents across the table next to her memory care brochures: medical evaluations, cognitive test results, bank statements, character references, and my daughter's financial records, the probation notice, the foreclosure papers, and the reverse mortgage application against my property. These are professional evaluations of my mental state, my daughter, all recent, all objective, all showing that I'm fully capable of living independently. She picked up the cognitive test results, scanned them, her hands visibly shaking. "I also have documentation of your financial situation, the real estate license issues, the house in foreclosure, the reverse mortgage application against my property. Dad, please, you forgot who raised you?" She looked up at me then, and for the first time in months, I saw my actual daughter instead of someone playing a role. "You forgot what I did for a living. 30 years of construction management, 30 years of dealing with contractors who tried to overbill and cut corners, 30 years of reading people who thought I was too old or too trusting to notice their schemes." "Dad, it's not like that. I really was worried about you." "Were you? Because it looks like you've been planning to take my house since before you filed this petition." I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen tomorrow, Ashley. You're going to tell the judge that you believe I need supervised care based on your observations. I'm going to present medical evidence that I don't. And the judge, is going to decide whether a daughter's financial desperation trumps objective medical assessments. What if I'm wrong about your condition? What if you really are declining and I just can't see it? Then I'll get the care I need. But if I'm right, everyone in that courtroom will know exactly why you really filed this petition. I'm scared, Dad. For the first time in our conversation, Ashley sounded like my daughter instead of someone reading from a script. Of what? Of losing everything. The house, my job, my whole life. I made some bad investments. The divorce was expensive. I'm behind on everything and I don't know how to catch up. Finally, the truth without the medical terminology and legal justifications. So you decided to solve your problems by taking away my home? I thought if you were in professional care, you'd be safer, and the house would be used to make sure you got the best treatment possible. Ashley, I don't need professional care. I need to live my own life in my own house. She flinched. I told myself this was about protecting you. But you're right. I need the money, and this seemed like the only way to access it before it's too late. Before I die, you mean? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought if I could use the reverse mortgage to stabilize my finances, I could take better care of you. Visit more often. Make sure you had everything you needed. While I lived in a memory care facility that cost $12,000 a month. Yes. And slowly watched all the equity Susan and I built disappear into care I don't need. She was crying openly now. I convinced myself you wouldn't mind, that you'd understand if you knew how bad things were for me. But looking at these medical reports, seeing how competent you still are, I've been lying to myself about everything. I watched my daughter fall apart and felt a mixture of love and disappointment and anger that I'd never experienced before. Ashley, financial problems don't justify stealing someone's home, even when that someone is your father. I know it's wrong. I just didn't know what else to do. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest about your situation instead of trying to have me declared mentally incompetent based on lies. Would you have helped? We'll never know. Now will we?